Thanks everybody for joining us on this episode of Invest Smart with Steadily. Today we've got our guest from Furnished Finder, Katie Lyon, on. We're going to discuss a little bit about midterm rentals and insurance and how they relate to each other. So Katie, I appreciate you joining us on today's episode. I'd like to start things, just a quick introduction, some background on your end, and then if you might as well just dive in a little bit whenever you're comfortable, as far as just maybe explaining Furnished Finder's value proposition and kind of where you guys fit in the midterm rental space.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Katie Lyon. I'm the marketing director for Furnished Finder. I'm also the podcast co-host, and I get to do a lot of the outreach and education for the platform and just kind of for midterm rentals in general. I am lucky because I also have at the end of this month, it'll be, I think, 14 midterm rentals of our own that I invest with my family. So we have a little family business on the side there. So I get to not only help with Furnished Finder, but also give people kind of a first person point of view on what it's like to be a landlord, how to use Furnished Finder the best ways, and just kind of overall tips and tricks. So Furnished Finder is the go-to platform for if you're looking for a midterm rental or if you're looking to list a midterm rental. So it's 30 days and up, nothing under 30 days. Everything is furnished, obviously, with our name, Furnished Finder. But it's really like it's a fantastic place to find your next tenant, or if you're a traveler, to find your next home. So that's our ultimate goal.
Awesome. I've got a quick caveat here. I'd love to learn a little bit of the background story. If you know, as far as kind of how Furnished Finder started, I'm sure that there might be a little bit of a personal story behind the idea. I'm curious.
Yeah, it's definitely like small business start, right? It's our original founders began with some rentals themselves and then kind of discovered that, wouldn't it be great if people had a better way to find these rentals or a better place to list these rentals, because they're not short-term rentals and they're not long-term rentals. They're different. So really, when you're using those other sites to list your rental that's for maybe 3 or 6 months, it just doesn't quite fit in the other sites as well. So they came up with a platform, tried out a few different models, and then it really hit the ground running during COVID when travel nursing took off. And maybe one city needed a lot of medical staff for a while, and then it would switch to another city. So the demand for traveling medical professionals was huge. At the beginning, we were only traveling medical professionals focused. And now it's still a large part of our tenant base, but it's not the biggest. We have a lot of corporate travelers, a lot of business travelers. We have relocating families. So it's just kind of evolved and grown and gone through all these different chapters. And it's really cool to have been a part of it during that growth and to see where we are now.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So you mentioned a little bit about how you guys might fit that space better for somebody that's trying to rent out their place for longer than 30 days. Yeah. So how specifically do you guys differentiate yourselves from, let's just say, the Airbnbs, the VRBOs? Like how would you say specifically there?
I mean, there's a few things that everybody needs to know when they're moving from, let's say, an Airbnb or a Vrbo and then on to Furnished Finder. First of all, we are only midterm rentals. So we're not here for a vacation. We're not here for a bachelorette party. We are here, my favorite use case to talk about is when my husband and I were finishing building the house that we're in right now. We thought we had planned for like plenty of extra time with construction, because we all know how construction goes. And we did not. And we ended up with about a 6-week gap. And we have 2 young kids. At the time, we had a dog, a cat, and a hedgehog. And it was like, there is no way that we're going to move into an apartment for 6 weeks. Like, this is just not doable. And we were like, what are we going to do? Thankfully, we ended up living with my in-laws, but it was a hard 6 weeks. It was challenging for everybody. Just mixture of lifestyles and pets and kids. And it was hard. Furnished Finder would have been perfect for us. We could have rented a place for 6 weeks. That was a single family home because that's what we needed. It could have been close to the school. It could have been everything we needed because we weren't looking for a year-long house. right? And we weren't looking for vacation. It's that middle. So that really is like the need that we serve. The other thing that's different is just kind of how we run our platform. So we strongly believe that we're not trying to be the middleman with transactions. We have a business model where to list your property, you pay one flat subscription price, and then travelers don't pay any booking fees or commissions, and neither does the landlord. So it's like much more affordable for all parties. And it makes it so that, the properties that you're seeing listed on the site, like they're ones that they really are serious and they want to be looking for a tenant and they're high quality.
Awesome. So you just mentioned some stuff about a little bit of uniqueness in how you guys operate with landlords and tenants. Could you go into a few of the features that you guys maybe operate differently in?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is just based on kind of the freedom that we give. We really want potential tenants and landlords to communicate. We encourage them. We're not here to block any chats or stop you from sending your phone numbers or your email addresses or anything. We want you to talk. We want landlords to have the chance to do tenant screenings. We want landlords to be able to incorporate things to protect their properties. So we try to just provide a lot of freedom within those relationships, because midterm rentals are about relationships, right? If you're going to an Airbnb for a week, you don't need to have a relationship with that property owner. If you're going to stay somewhere for 6 months, you need to have a relationship with that property owner, right? So we just try to make everything in respect of that, right? Making sure that the way that the functionality of the site and the process is all mindful of the fact that it really matters, those relationships.
So it sounds like a little bit like the tenants have easy access if they need something to be fixed. On top of that, when they move in, that there's a lot of furnishings in there and stuff, so that it's basically more move-in ready. But also they're maybe a little bit more on the responsive side than typically through the long-term rental process might see. Would I be a little on par on that?
Yeah. It's great because all the properties are move-in ready. It has to be furnished to be on our site. It has to be. If it's not furnished, you have to be in the process of furnishing it and not renting it until it's furnished. That's hands down a requirement, because these types of travelers are looking for places where they can move in and call it home, right? They're maybe a displaced family. They're an intern. They're a grad student. They might be visiting their grandkids for the summer for 2 months. They're looking to come in and move in. So that is a huge aspect of it.
Totally. So, Katie, you'd mentioned kind of during COVID, it made Furnished Finder boom a little bit faster than, or I guess grow a little bit faster than maybe the industry was moving in the past. So you mentioned that typically you guys were geared towards traveling nursing. Would you kind of key in a little bit on the increasing popularity that it's more than just travel nurses that are utilizing places like Furnished Finder?
Yeah. COVID did so much for our world, and especially in Furnished Finder, the demand increased really dramatically, right? Because we had all that need for medical professionals, especially in just different areas. Like I said, it would change so rapidly, right? You'd have an outburst here and an outburst there, and it'd be you have to just shift a lot. So there was a huge need for traveling medical professionals, but other things changed as well. I mean, midterm rentals have always been around. We haven't always been calling them that. Sometimes we've been saying corporate housing or relocation housing, or even travel nurse house. We've been calling it different things, and the term midterm rentals kind of a new catchphrase, but it's not a new thing. It's just grown a lot. And when you think about what else COVID did, you and I are both sitting in our home offices right now. So it's it went from working from home was kind of a luxury that only certain people had. And I don't know the statistics now, but I feel almost everybody I talk to is either working from home full time or they're a hybrid. So if I wanted to go stay by my family in the Midwest for the summer, I have no obstacles towards that, right? I can pack up my family. We can rent a property on Furnished Finder and we can stay there for 2 months. And it's just everybody I feel is less permanent in the place that they call home. And they've also, I think our mind frame has also, we all know what it felt like to be shut down. So now we're like, let's go explore a little bit. Right. And business travel is back, right? If they're going to open a new Chick-fil-A franchise, for example, they're probably going to send someone to oversee the project for the most critical 2 months, or send a key trainer or something like that. Right. Like business travel has changed, but it's very much back. And there's a lot of people that travel for work that are doing it for multiple months at a time, because this stuff it's happening all around us and right in front of us. We just don't always notice it because it's just kind of day-to-day stuff.
So, Katie, I don't want to throw you off too much here, but I've got a little bit of a personal story. So my girlfriend actually used Furnished Finder last fall when she did a travel nursing stint. So I'm from Kansas City. She traveled down to Dallas, and she used Furnished Finder to move into, again, a move-in ready space. So I was actually asking her a little bit about the experience before the podcast, and she was going on and on about how obviously how popular it is for travel nursing. That it's essentially a must-have to have a midterm rental type of opportunity where you can move to another city. You need to pack your essentially day-to-day necessities, your clothes, and then you go to work, and then you don't have to worry about anything else. And so it's almost like peace of mind. That everything's going to be ready for you. It's almost like an extended hotel that's a lot more personal and ready to go for you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, it is. It's perfect for them. I'm glad she had success with it, because it's
absolutely,
when you're doing these projects, right? Like, I mean, whether you're a travel nurse or whether you're put out of your house because of a flood or a fire, anything like that, you want to come somewhere and have it feel like home, right? Like that's the whole goal.
And on top of that, just like you talked about with making it feel like home, one aspect, or I guess market, that I hadn't even thought about is patients that have long-term care needs at hospitals. And so that's where my girlfriend nurse educated me on that they actually are referring their patients that need extended care in places that are basically offering that they need to stay within a certain mile threshold of a certain hospital size. And so we don't like to think about the realities of, being away from home or something, that if a loved one is sick or something, but being able to care for them and make them a little bit more comfortable when they're away from home. Like that's a huge thing too. So
and it's nice because like your property's doing something good, right? Like exactly. I've had tenants who traveled to be close to their surrogate who was giving birth. I have a tenant right now who's recovering from a kidney transplant and has to be close to the hospital for all of his appointments and everything. I've had actually a daughter who was coming to be close to her mom while she was on hospice. There's a lot of different cases, but in every case, like, yes, it's an investment as a property owner, but you are providing housing that someone really, really needs. And like, you're giving them, like, whether they're providing the care, they're receiving the care, they're on a work project, they're displaced from home, like whatever it is like they're people that they need this type of housing, right? So it makes it feel better when it's you're adding to the good in the world, right?
And Katie, all those scenarios you just mentioned are, at least in my opinion, really stressful times in people's lives. And so like, if anything, it's adding the peace of mind again that like, hey, we got you on this side. We can handle it. We'll take care of everything. We'll have it furnished for you. Whatever's going on in your life, we don't want the place that you're staying at to be an issue for you. We want that to be easy. So I'm sure that's a huge thing. So kind of on that. So on top of the benefit that, obviously you're providing like a good for society in that aspect, what are some, in addition to like some of the other obvious ones, like longer occupancies and reduced turnovers, like what would be some of the other benefits for the landlords that are working with Furnished Finder today?
Oh, there's tons. I can say firsthand, they're so easy to manage, right? Like you help someone get moved in, you get them all the, the Wi-Fi codes and the door locks and all that. But then like they're there to settle in, right? And you're not pestered if they're missing a beach towel or you're not getting people in and out all of the time. That is very, very streamlined. These tenants also really care about the property. they take really, really good care of it. You're not having the damage from constant move-ins, move outs. They are a lot more gentle on your furnishings because they're going to be there for a while. Right. So it's like, they don't want to mistreat things that they're going to have in their home, even if it's a temporary home, for 3 to 6 months or 9 months or whatever. Right. Like, they're taking care of things. So it's just, and it's really great to work with these professional type tenants. Like, they're very responsible. They're very responsive. And it just kind of makes your life as a landlord much, much easier.
For sure. For sure. Well, Katie, so I wouldn't be doing my part of the InvestSmart podcast if I didn't bring up the super interesting, fun topic of insurance. So with that being said, what would be a few unique insurance needs for Midterm? Would you maybe kind of discuss a little bit as far as what your experience has been on the claims side as far as your guys' Midterm rentals with Furnished Finder?
Yeah, I think it's a question we get a lot, is like, what do I do for insurance on my property? Luckily with these professional type tenants, the damage is typically a lot less, but you still need to have coverage. The most that we've experienced personally is we've had one, like a pan that was damaged. Like, someone cooked something that was, I'm sure, incredibly delicious. But the pan did not survive that experience, which, like, not a huge deal. And the only other thing I've had is like someone spilled red wine on a rug. But again, like a reflection of these tenant types, the first thing she did was text me and tell me. And so it's like, they're very responsible. Yeah. But you still have to be covered.
Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure. So maybe to highlight on some of like what the short-term rental insurance. So just a quick background, guys, at least at Steadily, we typically consider midterm rentals considered as far as the insurance policies. It's more similar to a short-term rental insurance policy rather than a long-term, because it's a year or longer at that LTR. So it's a pretty similar policy on that one, but basically part of what the insurance policy is going to cover is going to be from the dwelling, like basically, guys, damage against fires, anything like broken pipes, theft, personal liabilities, loss of rent. So I would say probably the biggest one for our insurance policies for the landlords would be the loss of rent. Basically, if the property becomes uninhabitable, again, like hate to say something bad is going to happen. Let's say a tree falls on a house and for 2 months it's being repaired or something, like that's where that loss of rent comes in and where that policy comes in to kind of protect the risk of something like losing rental income coming in. So that's probably going to be on the bigger end. Yeah.
That's huge. And that coverage I don't think is really talked about enough. We have a property in Florida, and a good friend of mine has a property just about a mile away there, and they were both hit by Hurricane Ian really hard. Luckily, ours, we did not have to, we had, some damage that we needed to use claims for there as far as damage on the property just by the hurricane. But she actually had to file for loss of rent. And that was the only thing that kept them afloat, because with the amount of time everything was taking and before their house was ready for their next tenant, that is what saved them, was that line item in their insurance. So that is something that definitely you cannot undervalue.
No, not at all. And it's also something that like kind of goes back to the main point of what a little bit of a concern in the industry of insurance is that people aren't really reading their coverages as closely as they maybe should. They say that people are oftentimes only read their insurance policies twice, is like when they're shopping and purchasing the policy. And then unfortunately the second time is when they're filing a claim. And so like really when you are shopping around for those policies, making sure that loss of rent is going to cover if something does happen. Because again, at the end of the day, like insurance is just risk mitigation. And so if you want the premium lower and you're going to have a lower loss of rent, that's great, but that doesn't lower the risk that something happens and then your rent is gone. So it's a lot of factors to be considered on that end. But again, that is property by property, and we'll let those landlords kind of decide for themselves. But all right, well, Katie, so could you walk us through how the landlords can list their properties on Furnished Finder?
Yeah. So it's really simple. You're just going to go to furnishedfinder.com and click on list your property and follow the prompts. It's just, it's a marketplace where you want to show your best face and put your best foot forward. So take listing very seriously and try to make your listing really high quality, because there are so many tenants looking for good homes. So many. If there weren't, I wouldn't have kind of the growing portfolio of rentals that I do, but like we're fully occupied. So we just keep going. And I'm like, I guess we'll stop when we're not occupied, but we're occupied. So the demand is there. The experience is great. And like, I feel like at Furnished Finder, we're working harder and harder to get partners like you guys at Steadily that can help the landlord and property owner and investor from all of the aspects, right? Because it can feel overwhelming when you're like getting started and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got to furnish. I've got to make sure I've got insurance. I've got to get the right funding. I've got to get all this. And it's like, okay, partners like you guys are going to come in and just like really help this be an attainable process for new and existing landlords, because it's such a great space and it's going to grow so much. Like the different types of tenants just keeps growing. And it truly is like, I kind of ended up here and with all these properties, like just kind of by a little bit of accident and serendipity. But it was like, once I discovered it, I was like, this is amazing. Let's keep going. So I'm just excited for everybody else to kind of discover that and be able to work with you guys, because the insurance is always such a big question. It's like, what are the first questions I always get as a landlord? It's like, what about insurance? I'm like, well, you need it and it needs to be good. So there's just so much possibility, and this space is going to grow so much more.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's pretend for a second I'm a brand new landlord. I'm trying to go on to Furnished Finder and put my property up. What would be a few tangible tips that they could take and move forward to making their listing just that much more attractive?
Yeah. I always tell people to invest in professional photography. Like always. It is a 100% must. It is not optional.
So not my iPhone.
Not your iPhone. And I actually don't even care how good you are with your iPhone. You still need to hire someone. Like have to, must, 100%. Real estate photographers are not expensive. It's one of the lowest investments you'll make, and the quickest you'll make your money back is with professional real estate photos. I also tell people to accept pets if you can. Like I know nobody wants to accept pets, but roughly half of our travelers are traveling with pets. Because again, they're not going on vacation. Like when you go on vacation, you're leaving Fido at home. But if I'm staying somewhere for, 3 to 6 months or something, I have my pets. And if these travelers are solo, like a lot of them like a companion, right? Like a lot of them come with a golden doodle in tow. So do what you need to do to protect yourself and feel comfortable with like a deposit or a lease amendment or whatever you want. But you really need to try to get pets. The other thing is the amenities in midterm rentals are very different than short-term rentals. Like nobody needs bikes and fancy decorations or really even like a pool or a hot tub. Those things are great, but what they really want is free parking. They want a washer and dryer. They want fast Wi-Fi. Like, can you put a desk in the property? These are the things that these travelers really, really want because they're there for a while. So just remember, like, if you can add some of those amenities, that's going to really help you too.
That's great. That's great. Okay. So sometimes pictures of properties don't reflect reality. Any tips for hosts on making them attractive?
Ooh, I love pops of color. I really like pops of color because I think, we're so overwhelmed with images and content and everything today that it's like, you want to do something to stop their scroll, right? So I always try to either pick like an accent chair or a couch that's a bold color. And then I think just like really thoughtful amounts of decorations. You don't need a lot. Just be thoughtful about it. And it's okay to have fun, right? Like in a few of our properties, we have bathrooms that have like word searches on the wall. And they're just from Hobby Lobby. They're not like, they were like $8, but it's like it makes you seem like you're human, right? They don't want to go to a hotel. They're trying to stay in a home. So it's like, make them feel comfortable, have a little bit of personality, have some fun with it. but you don't have to go wild. Like these travelers are often bringing a few suitcases, right? You probably know from your girlfriend, like she's going to bring some of her own stuff.
Just a few things.
Just a few things. So like give them space too. And like show off a picture of a closet that has a lot of storage area, right? Because they're going to have some stuff.
Yeah. Think about the person that might be renting. It sounds like keep them in mind a little bit.
Exactly.
Well, this isn't going to sound super smart, but when I was doing some research and when I was first joined Steadily and was entering the space, when I was learning more about the short-term rental space, I remember being interested. And then when I heard about the midterm rental space, I remember like my first thought, and again, this isn't going to sound smart, so nobody make too much fun of me, but I remember just being like, wow, that is a really good idea. And I'm like, man, I wish I'd come up with that as far as there's a huge need for this. And you can collect a premium as a landlord. You're collecting more consistent occupancy coming in and out. Like it just seems like the risk profile is a lot lower than the STRs. But the premium that you're collecting is a lot more similar to the STR rather than a long-term rental. And when I say STR, guys, just for everyone in the background, short-term rental. So it's more like a short-term rental premium with a long-term rental occupancy. And so it just sounds incredibly appealing to me.
I mean, when I first started working here right off the bat, like I knew I wanted to do some real estate investing coincidentally. And I was like, okay, we'll look at a short term. And then quickly I was like, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming. There's going to be so many turnovers. And that's totally fine if that's your jam.
It's a very active investment.
Right. It's not my jam. Mm-hmm. Like I want like the type of investment where I can like get a tenant settled in. And then I'm like, okay, I'll talk to you if there's an issue. Otherwise I'll talk to you in 4 months. Right. And not to be disrespectful, but just to let them go live their lives. Like they're good. But yeah, it is. You're generally looking at about 1.5 to 2 times of long-term rent. In some markets, you get a lot more than that. Some property sizes, you get a lot more than that. But for that, and you're not doing the turnovers, you don't have the vacancy. It's really, really big. It's really big. I mean, I think in most of our properties, we've had, I don't know, the occupancy rate isn't as big of a thing in midterm rentals because you're not always chopping it up. But I'm like, it is not uncommon for me to have a same day turnover, which I don't love for my own management purposes. But I just make my husband deal with it.
It's pretty cool to say.
Right. I'm like, I just make him deal with it. So it's actually not that hard on me, but it's like, I'm like, okay, if it might be a couple days or a week until you get your next person. But even if you have a gap of 3 weeks between your next guest, well, then you're putting someone in there for an average of 3 or 4 months. So that might feel really uncomfortable for an investor to sit with a property that's vacant for 3 weeks. But then if you're filling it consistently for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, like that is a solid W.
So it sounds like to me, a well-managed MTR is a very dangerous asset in a good way. A very dangerous asset to be an owner of or an investor.
I mean, really,
in,
I should stop telling people, but
seriously,
but there's room for all of us. Like there is, like there's just so many people. So it's like that are in need of it. That's why I'm like, this is not a scarcity environment. Like it's there is room for everybody.
So a few key components here, guys. Everybody on your insurance policies, check, especially on that loss of rental income. That's going to be sufficient if something does happen that you don't want or to think about that does happen. That's a main thing to think about. Some advice if you are going in the MTR space, maybe make it pop with some colors in that spot. So maybe add some colors in there, get some professional photography. But again, a well-managed property, and this isn't anything new, but a well-managed property in the MTR space can collect a great premium for what seems like a well-adjusted risk on that end.
Yep.
I think that this is a great opportunity for any of those investors out there or any of those landlords out there. Feel free to reach out to Katie Lyon over at Furnished Finder. Katie, thank you so much for joining us today on our
this was
episode
great.
of Invest Smart.